terms of Gommecourt, obviously they turned out to be a bit of futile slaughter of British lives, didn't actually achieve anything. Would you say the kind of complete disaster for the British was down to the Germans' efficiency of defence, or was it due to more incompetence from the top from the British, or how much?
It was a combination of factors. You can never say it's any one thing, but unfortunately the absolutely certain efficiency of the German defence was enough, or more than enough, to overcome the complacency that the entire attack on the first day of the Somme, which pervaded it. I mean, there was an assumption, because the British had more guns, more artillery pieces and more ammunition than they'd ever had before, not just in the First World War, but ever. This was the biggest bombardment in the history of the British Army, that it had to succeed, that the Germans had to be dead, and therefore it would be a walkover, which is why, in fact, the British were told to walk at 50 paces a minute. But of course, life isn't like that. The Germans had thought through how they would defend against an attack, how would they get their men to survive, crucially, how would they get their machine guns to survive, and how could they employ their less numerous guns and artillery in the most efficient manner. Their general was more experienced than the British ones, their soldiers were more experienced than the British ones. Bravery doesn't really come into it, both as brave as one another, but complacency and arrogance, to a certain extent, on the British played into the hands of the Germans.
I mean, on that complacency, would you say that complacency was perhaps lack of consideration long term for the variation in conditions on the day?
I think it was they were making an enormous number of assumptions. So nobody ever, for example, put themselves into the position of the Germans. Said, how would they defend us? So how can we overcome what they might try to do to us? There was never any question of sod's law, i.e. what will go wrong can go wrong, or can go wrong will go wrong, rather. They didn't consider that. There was no consideration of the possibility of failure. It was assumed that the bombardment would do its job, therefore the British soldiers would be able to pretty much walk through the German defences because they would be either dead, demoralised, or so incapacitated they weren't going to be capable of defending themselves. That had to be the case because we'd never had so many guns and we'd never had so many shells. But life isn't like that, and it took the disaster, not just at Gommecourt, but on the first day of the Somme, along 3/4 of the British front, 57,000 casualties, to prove conclusively that you could not make that number of assumptions and get away with it.
Okay, last question then. Do you think with different conditions on the day, perhaps the trench system wasn't so messy, if it wasn't as badly organised and prepped out, that the kind of diversion at Gommecourt could have ever worked?
I don't think it would have done. The conditions might, particularly on the 46th Division's front, might have made life a little easier for them. But the German defences were very strong. They had been precious little damaged by the bombardment, to be blunt. The British guns just had too many targets to fire at. And instead of concentrating their efforts, they dissipated their efforts, and there was never sufficient damage done to the defences or to the defenders to make it possible for the British ever to do anything other than get so far, like the London Division got so far and then got trapped. And one of the other major things that they admitted afterwards, one of the guy who's the artillery advisor to Sir Douglas Haig, a guy called Major General Noel Birch, unbelievably said after the attack, we really didn't know a great deal about counter-battery fire, i.e. trying to neutralise or destroy the enemy's artillery. The French had learned all these lessons, the British did not. So they never employed sufficient guns to destroy the German artillery, and it was the German artillery that destroyed the British infantry. So I think probably without a change in attitude at an enormous range of levels, that it still wouldn't have succeeded.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
That's all good.